Titan submersible implosion. On June 18, 2023, the Titan submersible launched from the support ship Polar Prince at 8:55 a.m. for a planned 8-hour dive to the Titanic wreck site in the North Atlantic Ocean. 5 occupants descended toward the seafloor nearly 12,500 feet below, including CEO Stockton Rush, British billionaire Hamish Harding, French Titanic expert Paul-Henri Nargeolet, and Pakistani businessman Shahzada Dawood, with his 19-year-old son, Suleiman. The experimental carbon fiber vessel had made the journey multiple times before. The descent proceeded normally for the first 90 minutes as the submersible dropped ballast weights to control its rate. At 10:47 a.m., Titan sent its final message to the surface crew, a routine communication stating, "Dropped 2 WTs." Then silence. United States Navy acoustic sensors detected an anomaly consistent with an implosion occurring between 10:47 and 10:49 a.m., though this information wasn't immediately shared with search coordinators. At 10:49 a.m., the Polar Prince lost all contact and tracking with the submersible. When Titan failed to resurface at the scheduled 3 p.m. time, the Coast Guard was notified at 7:10 p.m. A massive international search and rescue operation launched over the next 4 days, with ships, aircraft, and underwater robots combing the area. On June 22nd, a remotely operated vehicle discovered a debris field 1,600 feet from the Titanic's bow. The debris confirmed what Navy sensors had detected days earlier. A catastrophic implosion had occurred instantly on Sunday, obliterating all 5 occupants in milliseconds as the 5-inch thick carbon fiber hull failed under extreme pressure. The Coast Guard investigation later concluded the experimental design had ignored multiple safety warnings, leading to new recommendations for mandatory third-party certification of all deep-sea submersibles. Byford Dolphin explosion. On November 5, 1983, around 2:30 p.m., 4 saturation divers were inside pressurized living chambers aboard the Byford Dolphin semi-submersible oil rig in the North Sea. Truls Hellevick, 34, Edwin Coward, 35, Roy Lucas, 38, and Bjorn Bergersen, 29, worked as professional deep-sea divers maintaining underwater oil infrastructure. The chambers were pressurized to 9 atmospheres, approximately 1,200 psi, matching the pressure at their working depth to prevent decompression sickness during shift changes. The diving bell had just docked to the chamber system to transfer 2 divers back inside after their shift. A crew member began the standard procedure to seal the connection between the bell and the living chamber. Then, the unthinkable happened. The diving bell clamp was accidentally opened before the chamber door was fully sealed. The seal failed catastrophically. The tremendous pressure differential caused an explosive decompression from 9 atmospheres to 1 atmosphere in a fraction of a second. The air in the diver's blood and tissues expanded instantly, causing their organs to rupture from the inside. Truls Hellevick, positioned nearest the door, was forced through a 24-inch crescent-shaped opening by the violently escaping pressure. His body fragmented and was ejected onto the rig deck. The other 3 divers died instantly from internal rupture, as their blood literally boiled. Martin Saunders, positioned outside the chamber, suffered devastating injuries but survived. The accident led to significant safety overhauls in North Sea saturation diving, including mandatory interlock mechanisms to prevent clamps from opening while chambers remained pressurized. Paria pipeline vortex. On Friday, February 25, 2022, around 3 p.m., 5 commercial divers were repairing a 30-inch oil pipeline on the seabed in the Gulf of Paria, offshore Pointe-à-Pierre, Trinidad and Tobago. Kazim Ali Jr., 36, Yusuf Henry, 31, Faisal Kurban, Rishi Nagasar, 48, and Christopher Boudram worked as experienced underwater maintenance technicians for Paria Fuel Trading Company. The routine repair involved removing an inflatable plug from inside the pipe. When they removed the plug, a differential pressure vortex formed instantly. The delta P phenomenon created an invisible force that sucked all 5 divers into the narrow 30-inch pipe opening in seconds. They were tumbled violently inside the dark, oil-slicked interior as the vortex pulled them deeper into the pipeline system. The men struggled in the confined space, unable to turn around or move freely. Christopher Boudram managed to orient himself and began crawling through the sludge-filled pipe. For 3 hours, he pushed through the claustrophobic darkness until he found an exit point and escaped. He immediately alerted the surface crew that the other 4 men were alive inside the pipe, trapped but breathing. Paria Fuel Trading Company management made the decision to prevent rescue divers from entering the pipe, citing safety protocols and liability concerns. The trapped divers remained alive for hours, possibly days, banging on the pipe walls to signal their location. A GoPro camera later recovered audio of them praying and comforting each other before dying of asphyxiation. Bodies were recovered days later. A commission of inquiry later recommended corporate manslaughter charges against Paria Fuel Trading Company for blocking the rescue of men who were known to be alive. Dave Shaw's descent. On January 8, 2005, during daylight hours, Australian diver Dave Shaw descended into Boesmansgat Cave in South Africa to recover the body of Dion Dreyer, who had died there in 1994. Shaw, 50 years old, was an experienced technical diver attempting one of the deepest cave body recoveries ever undertaken. The dive would take him to 270 meters, 886 feet below the surface, using a specialized rebreather system. Shaw reached the bottom in 10 minutes and successfully located Dreyer's skeletal remains in the silt. He began working to free Dreyer's legs from the sediment, but the physical exertion increased his respiration rate dramatically. His rebreather's diluent valve had been slightly overfilled during preparation, preventing full exhalation and proper carbon dioxide scrubbing from the breathing loop. High physical effort at extreme depth caused rapid CO2 buildup in his system. Shaw became entangled in the line he had attached to the body bag. Nitrogen narcosis and carbon dioxide toxicity caused severe disorientation and increasingly labored breathing. His helmet-mounted camera captured the final moments as his breathing patterns became irregular, and then stopped 22 minutes into the dive. Shaw died on the bottom of the cave. His buoyancy eventually lifted him toward the surface. Days later, Shaw's body surfaced with Dion Dreyer's remains still attached to his recovery line. Shaw successfully recovered Dreyer's body posthumously, as the line he attached dragged the remains up with him, but the dive highlighted the lethal dangers of CO2 buildup at extreme depth. By the way, if you find this informative, I cover stories like these regularly. Consider subscribing if you'd like to see more. Now back to the video. Kursk submarine trapped. On August 12, 2000, at 11:29:34 a.m., a faulty practice torpedo aboard the Russian nuclear submarine Kursk leaked high-test peroxide in the Barents Sea, causing an initial explosion. Captain Lieutenant Dmitry Kolesnikov, 27, commanded a crew of 118 sailors on the Oscar-class vessel during routine naval exercises. 2 minutes and 14 seconds later, at 11:31:48 a.m., the fire detonated the remaining warheads in a massive second explosion. The submarine sank to 108 meters. The forward compartments were destroyed instantly, killing 95 crew members. 23 sailors survived in the aft compartment 9, sealed off from the devastation. Kolesnikov, the senior officer among the survivors, wrote a note at 1:15 p.m., confirming 23 men were alive and documenting the rising pressure. The crew waited in the dark, cold compartment as oxygen levels slowly declined and hope for rescue faded. Hours passed as the survivors struggled to breathe in the deteriorating atmosphere. Someone attempted to deploy a potassium superoxide cartridge designed to generate emergency oxygen. The cartridge was accidentally dropped into oily water pooled on the compartment floor. The chemical reaction triggered a flash fire that consumed the remaining oxygen in seconds. All 23 survivors died of asphyxiation and fire-related injuries. Norwegian divers opened the hatch days later after the Russian government finally accepted international rescue assistance. The note found on Kolesnikov's body, written blindly in the darkness, stating, "It's dark here to write, but I'll try by feel," confirmed that the crew survived for hours while rescue was delayed. Audrey Mestre's attempt. On October 12, 2002, during daylight hours at Bayahibe Beach in the Dominican Republic, French freediver Audrey Mestre attempted a no-limits world record dive to 171 meters, 561 feet below the surface. Mestre, 28 years old, was an accomplished competitive freediver, married to Francisco Pipin Ferreras, who organized and supervised the record attempt. She had trained extensively for the dangerous dive, using a weighted sled for descent and an airlift bag for rapid ascent. Mestre descended successfully on the sled, reaching her target depth of 171 meters. Then, disaster struck. The lift bag failed to inflate for her return to the surface. Inspection of the equipment later revealed the air tank designated for the lift bag was completely empty. A safety diver attempted to deploy a rescue bag to bring Mestre up, but strong currents and drag caused it to rise extremely slowly. Mestre lost consciousness during the agonizingly slow ascent as her body depleted its oxygen reserves. She reached the surface after 8.5 minutes underwater, far exceeding the human limit of 3 to 4 minutes for breath-hold diving. Her husband, Ferreras, attempted resuscitation in the water instead of immediately moving her to the support boat, where medical equipment was available. Mestre was pronounced dead. The autopsy confirmed death by drowning and hypoxia. The dive was heavily criticized for lacking medical personnel and proper equipment checks, leading to permanent safety changes in competitive freediving, including mandatory independent verification of lift gases. Blue hole recording. On April 28, 2000, during daylight hours, 22-year-old Russian diver Yuri Lipsky attempted a solo dive to the Arch Formation at the Blue Hole in Dahab, Egypt. The Blue Hole is a submarine sinkhole notorious among technical divers for claiming numerous lives. Lipsky carried only a single tank of standard compressed air, an inadequate and dangerous choice for the depths he intended to reach. He wore a helmet-mounted camera to document his dive. Lipsky entered the arch opening at 55 meters depth, but continued descending instead of turning back. Nitrogen narcosis began affecting his judgment and motor control, creating an intoxication-like state that worsened with every meter deeper. He spiraled downward uncontrollably, unable to arrest his descent or think clearly enough to inflate his buoyancy compensator. The camera recorded his increasingly panicked movements as he repeatedly checked his dive computer, watching the depth reading climb past safe limits. Lipsky reached 115 meters, 377 feet, on the sandy bottom. The footage captured his convulsions and erratic behavior as nitrogen narcosis and oxygen toxicity overwhelmed his system. In his final moments of consciousness, he removed his regulator in confusion and drowned on the seabed. The camera continued recording the motionless scene until the battery died. Technical diver Tarek Omar, a well-known local dive instructor, recovered Lipsky's body and the camera the following day. The recovered video footage provided a rare, terrifying first-person perspective of nitrogen narcosis and drowning, becoming a standard safety warning shown to divers worldwide. Stephen Keenan's sacrifice. On July 22, 2017, during daylight hours at the Blue Hole in Dahab, Egypt, 39-year-old Irish safety diver Stephen Keenan was working as chief of safety for a freediving training session at the Arch. World record freediver Alessia Zecchini was attempting a deep dive as part of her competition preparation. Keenan had extensive experience in freediving safety protocols and had formed a close professional bond with Zecchini during previous training sessions. Zecchini became disoriented during her ascent and surfaced in the wrong location, away from the designated safety zone. Keenan immediately spotted her struggling in the water and swam down to assist. He guided Zecchini back to the surface line, using up his own breath hold to ensure her safety. Keenan successfully brought Zecchini to the safety team at the surface, completing his rescue mission. In the final meters of his own ascent, Keenan suffered a shallow water blackout as his brain ran out of oxygen. He surfaced unconscious, floating face down in the water. Strong winds and currents delayed the rescue team from reaching him quickly enough. Multiple rescuers attempted CPR, but the efforts failed. Keenan died from drowning complications, while Zecchini survived solely because of his intervention. Keenan's death was mourned globally as a heroic act of self-sacrifice, and his story was later immortalized in the documentary The Deepest Breath. If you found value in this, a subscription helps me continue researching these stories. Thanks for watching.